The space battles were good. The movie looked and felt like Star Wars, and Rey is actually relatable this time around, not as insufferable as in The Force Awakens. Carrie Fisher was also great as Leia here, whereas she felt rusty and wooden in The Force Awakens. The bombing scene at the start of the movie with these B-17-like rebel bombers was excellent, and revived some of the old feeling and aesthetic of Star Wars as World War II in space. Although one wonders how bombs managed to fall in zero gravity. Poe attacking the Imperial fleet all alone and making a prank call to the commander was unneeded. I would have preferred a squadron of X-Wings to clear out the cannons on the Dreadnought in preparation of the bombers moving in. It's also hard to believe that with thousands of men and several capital ships concentrated in the same space, the First Order doesn't have any fighters on duty. But back to the positives. Adam Driver gave a great performance as Kylo Ren. His story in the movie continued the goth, emo vibe laid down for him in The Force Awakens, but makes it deeper, less ridiculous and more relatable. Kylo Ren is really the main character of this movie, and I like that. Oscar Isaac was also great as Poe, and again, the storyline supported him well in his arc from rash flyboy to realising that human life is important. He's set up to mature to become a leader in the next film. The space battle where rebels kept outrunning the First Order for hours was something new. The way they were trapped in space, with neither side being able to end it, added a horror element to the movie, which I liked. But the movie didn't really capitalise on it. It was simply used as a plot device to keep the tension high, and the movie then introduced the casino plot, which watered down the intensity, so it all ended up feeling a bit flat. And if you think about it, are we really to believe that the First Order doesn't have mid-class ships or TIE bombers that they could dispatch to kill off the rebel fleet? The lightspeed crash was beautiful, and as far as the pure cinematic experience goes, this will probably be the high point of the movie for many. But again, if those tactics were viable, why haven't they been used before? And if smaller cruiser ships can take out capital ships this way, wouldn't that define how space battles played out? In fact, render capital ships unviable. I didn't like how there were so many new characters all over the place, but not enough focus on either of them. The new Admiral was unneeded, and the callback to Maz was unneeded. The Rose character was sympathetic, but again, the movie could have done without her. Benicio del Toro as Jack Sparrow in space was charming, but not really needed either. I'm not saying that they should cut all of this out, but they should have focused on fewer things and developed those more in depth, than spam the story with all these new characters, with the main storyline still blurred, and could have used more deepening and fleshing out. The whole casino plot was unneeded, and felt like a diversion. The animal cruelty message felt out of place and clumsy, and had no relation to the overall storyline. The fact that in the end the whole casino and codebreaker plan failed, made all the time spent on this subplot extra silly. Also, if Del Toro hadn't tipped off the First Order about the cloaked transports, 50% of the people on them wouldn't have died. This means that half of the rebellion dies because Poe, Finn and Rose disobey their orders, and think they know better than the purple-haired Admiral, and no one really hates them for it. Leia and the others just forgive them. I felt it was insulting to the audience's intelligence that first we're told that the heroes are looking for a master codebreaker, of which there are supposedly only 2 in the galaxy. They then get thrown into a random cell out of hundreds, where there just happens to be a third codebreaker with exactly the skills they're looking for. That's just silly, and doesn't survive 10 seconds of scrutiny. There are quite a few of such nonsensical moments in the film. For example, the politics are confusing. If the heroes we see on screen are all that's left of the Resistance, how can there be more allies in the Outer Rim? And if the fleet makes a jump to somewhere we're told is in the middle of nowhere, how come there just happens to be a rebel base nearby? That felt like one big excuse to set up the final ground battle. And speaking of the ground battle, the final scenes at the Ice World felt underwhelming. The First Order had multiple Star Destroyers in orbit, and all they could send down there was 8 walkers and a cannon, along with 15 TIEs. I really don't get that. I was pretty disappointed in the lack of an actual lightsaber duel in this movie. Usually, these duels are significant, both action-wise and psychology for the characters. Some people liked the Kylo and Rey versus Red Guards fights, but it felt lacking in psychology. The enemies were essentially anonymous, and it felt more like Neo and Trinity battling agents in The Matrix than a Star Wars lightsaber fight. There were no old-style lightsaber fights with something at stake for the characters here. Yes, Luke fought Kylo, but he was revealed to be a projection, which again felt Matrix-like and ultimately flat. There is no tension here when Luke is essentially invulnerable. I'm okay with Luke dying, but Leia should have died too, or at least not made that silly Mary Poppins walk in space back to the ship. I still didn't like Finn. It's like they don't really have anything for him to do, nor any definite characterization for him. He's deserting one moment, then heroically sacrificing himself the next. We seem to get some answers, some resolution of the frustrations left behind by The Force Awakens, but everything is really non-committal and can be reversed in Episode 9. Is Snoke really dead? Is Phasma? Are Rey's parents really nobodies who sold her for drinking money? The Last Jedi is not as bad as The Force Awakens in terms of holding out on us with a story, and this time it's probably not intentional, but it's still pretty frustrating. I was also disappointed in the lack of actual lessons for Rey. We didn't learn anything new about the Force, and I didn't understand the point of Rey in the cave. It felt superfluous. In spite of what many reviewers have said about the scenes with Rey and Luke being too slow-paced, I like those scenes where Luke was going to train Rey the best. But the payoff from those scenes never came, because the story then shifts towards the Rey-Kylo connected minds plot, and the whole training with Luke thing just evaporates. Like the casino plot, it was another significant part of the movie that was never really resolved in a satisfying way. Overall, I was more disappointed with this movie than I was excited with it. I had expected it to go in my top 3, but it will probably land in 4th or 5th place.